Hello? Signal is bad. Are you back? You froze there for a minute.
I think so.
Yeah.
You too, and I don't know whether it's your end or mine.
I'm not sure, you know. I can't tell. But it's lagging and freezing for a bit.
I can try
people
reloading the page and see what happens.
Yeah, give it a shot. I'll take you off for a second till you come back. Hello, guys. If you're on, drop a comment. Let me know you're here. Let's just wait for Lynn to reset, and then we can get into it. Mr. McCool, what's going on? Howard, Kenneth, big up, boss. Puppy is doing well. Everything is with him. He's growing real fast too. So, please share, like, and share this with everybody because this is gonna be a good one. We got Lynn from OC Flock Management in Canada. They're one of the pioneers of sending genetics to Jamaica. So, you know, she got a lot of information. Lynn, you there now? You got me? I think your internet is still lagging. It's lagging a little bit, but you're there.
I'm not sure I can fix that. I live Saturday night, 2 days after Canada restrictions, and I live right between two lakes.
Okay, so you're in the country just like me.
Yeah, on a holiday weekend.
Kareem. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, I understand that. So everyone, this is Lynn Tait from OC Flock Management in Canada. OC Flock Management, I think, is one of the first companies to actually send genetics to Jamaica, correctly? Whether it's semen or animals, right?
I believe so, yes. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I know you were
the second one, maybe, to send semen and embryos.
Yes, and you work with Dr. Young.
I think there were one shipment of live animals prior to us.
Okay, and that was you when you send semen and stuff was Dr. Young, right? Is it Dr. Young you were working with?
Yes, and we've also sent. Yes, and we also sent Katahdin and Dorper embryos as part of a government contract a number of years ago.
Okay, so can you give us a background and history of OC Flock Management and what they do?
So we started, I graduated veterinary school in 1980 and was mainly in cattle practice. And then Dr. Wenger and myself got together in 97 or 98. We had some clients who wanted to be able to collect semen and freeze it. And so then we started from there and learned very fast that if you're going to produce semen, you need to learn how to do artificial insemination to use it. And then progressed on to adding embryos. So I guess we've been doing sort of the full picture since about 2001. So 20 years this year. Dr. Wenger retired in the fall of 2018. She's a little bit older than I am. And I've continued on and now have another veterinarian who works part-time for me during the breeding season.
Okay. So what is your average success rate with your semen, your AI or embryo transfers?
It can vary quite a bit, but in the big averages, we normally tell people to expect somewhere between semen, a little bit better than that, usually with fresh semen, and about 50% on average with frozen embryos. Fresh embryos, again, a little bit better, maybe 60, 70%. Anytime you freeze something, but it happens, so you'll have a certain percentage of loss just from the freezing process that especially can't really be evaluated looking at them. And when they don't do anything, they just lay there. So unless they look really destroyed, it's hard to tell if they're alive or dead when you implant them.
Okay. Yeah, because I know I've seen under the microscope, I've seen the semen. Thanks to Dr. Young, she showed me, and you can see all these little guys swimming all over the place. So I assume it's much different for embryos. Embryos is definitely like an egg, just sits there. Right?
Yes.
So give us a little history of your relationship with Jamaica and servicing Jamaica with genetics. I know you mentioned it a little earlier. We got a lag in the internet.
Sorry, I lost part of that.
No, I said give us, you mentioned earlier when we were speaking earlier about your history with Jamaica and servicing Jamaica with genetics. Can you give our listeners and viewers a little synopsis of the history, how far you go back with Jamaica and who you work with down here?
So I think way back, our first introduction to Jamaica was actually through Ram H4 goats. I believe they had sold live animals to Jamaica, and Dr. Martin Wenkoff came to do some embryo transfer work, and Dr. Wenger, my business partner, did the surgery for him. So that was our first sort of introduction. Since then, we've worked with Gabby Young, Dr. Young. She's been up in Canada. We've met her and worked with her, done exports to her, probably, I'm thinking now since about 2006 was probably the first shipment that we sent. And often it takes several years between. Exporting is very expensive, or importing in the case of the Jamaican producers. So often they'll import semen or embryos that will give them genetics for several years to use before they do a second import. That's a pretty cost-effective way to do that.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Young is on right now watching us, so she's a regular supporter of the show, and she's been on the show several times. So tell her a little, what is the purpose of artificial insemination and embryo transfer? In your words and with your experience, what do you think is the real purpose of doing this?
I guess there can be a few different reasons to do artificial insemination. For some of my clients here in Canada, it's for biosecurity. They have very high health, what we call a closed flock, where bringing live animals in is not an acceptable way to introduce new genetics. So then semen and embryos are what they use in order to bring new genetics in without putting their health status at risk. It's also a very viable way to get better quality genetics or higher performance genetics that you may or may not have access to the actual animals. The person who owns the top dairy buck may not want to sell the buck. He may not want him running around the countryside breeding other animals, but semen's a viable way to access those genetics. And so I think, those are the two main ones. And then obviously the third one is genetic diversity. In some breeds or sometimes locations, Jamaica is an island that has quite restrictive regulations about live animal imports. And so genetic diversity can be an issue. So sometimes it's not just looking for bad performance. Maybe the performance is already good, but you're looking for different genetics so that you don't get too inbred and lose on performance in the process. It's also the most probably cost-effective way to move genetics around the world. Much cheaper and easier than moving animals around the world.
Yeah, I think for Jamaica, it's twofold. It's diversity and also for improvement of the genetics. Like, we're a small island, and sooner or later, everybody's going to be related to each other. So you got to inject new genetics every so often, right?
Yeah, Canada is a bigger country, but we're a small industry. We have the same issue.
Yeah. So would you say AI and embryo transfer is for everyone, or as an operator, you have to be strategic? And who would you recommend doing it if, let's say, diversity and all that is not in play? If you're a new farmer or a farmer that's in it for 5 years or whatever, who would you recommend doing it? Would you recommend a new farmer to do it, or you recommend someone more experienced and has some years under their belt?
I think for me, it's less about experience and more about where they are in their operation. There's a lot of factors that will affect not only the success rate of artificial insemination, but also the success rate of the genetics that are introduced. So if a producer doesn't have their management and their nutrition a good base to work from, then I could sell you the best genetics in the world, and the offspring are not going to live up to their potential if they're not managed appropriately. And so I think that's one of the things people really need to look at. I get this a lot, that people think that better genetics will solve all their problems. Just throw better genetics at it and you will have better animals, better production and everything else. But if the feed or the management or there's health issues within the farm, if those things aren't addressed, then the better genetics aren't going to solve those problems. In fact, probably they're just going to make them even more obvious, because now you're pushing genetics that need a better level of management. And so they're going to fail as a genetic input, unfortunately. And so I think that's the first thing people need to look at is, do I have, in the English expression, all my ducks in a row? If you're starting in the same pond, then maybe for artificial insemination, especially for frozen or imported semen, maybe on a fresh semen program where there's some good bucks that they could get started using those with a fresh, little less investment, but higher success rate, unless its management parameters aren't addressed first.
Okay, so basically, well, based on what you just said, a new farmer who doesn't have as much experience in management and all that stuff shouldn't get into AI and embryo transfer, because the management of the process and the animals are up there in priority, right? I don't think she got that. You there?
It's not just about manage for the insemination, it's about through the whole production cycle. So you're a farmer to participate, but I think if it's something they're interested in and they have give themselves a year to learn to manage the animals, work with nutrition consultants and other things like that, and get everything in place, then certainly artificial insemination is a viable way then to look at starting the genetic nutrition working for them.
We got internet problems, but we're gonna work with it. Are you there?
No,
So
you're gone, are you?
if yeah, I'm
Yep.
here. So if like our farm now, we want to get into really jumpstart our milking production or milk production. How long would it take to really inject good milk genetics in and to have a whole herd being efficient? How long you think that would take to be using AI or embryo transfer to actually have a nice, say, 40 animals that has strong milk genetics, if that's what I'm trying to put in?
I think if your other management nutrition's in place and you start to bring in improved genetics and have a good selection process on the offspring, you have criteria of what you're looking for.
Yes.
I would say for you've got to look at, this is kind of a 3 to plan. This is not happening in one generation.
Okay.
Although embryos will get you the top genetics fast because you're getting both sides, both the mother and the father. I think especially when you're in climate and potentially a somewhat production system, I think artificial insemination gives you offspring that have 50% of the improved genetics and 50% of the animals that are adapted to live in your environment. And I think that's really pretty key sometimes. Go in Alberta, know how to deal with winter, but maybe don't cope with hot, humid days month after month. And so I think that certainly it has to be a longer term game plan. You're not going to suddenly do it one time and suddenly have all stars in your farm. That does take time and selection.
So importing, like, Jamaica is hot all year round. It's hot, and so you wouldn't suggest, like, say, OC Flock had this amazing milk milk milking genetic, and we want the animal down here, whether it's an embryo or if it's a live animal. You would advise against that because of the drastic change in climate.
I would definitely advise against live animal imports because now you have a live animal that was born in a completely different climate that needs to adapt to your climate. And I think that sometimes can be very difficult for them to do. Embryos are more likely to adapt than live animals because they're going to be born in Jamaica. And so that's the only climate they're ever going to know. I think if you have the option, find milking genetics also of animals that are, say, breeds that are heat tolerant. The Saanen is the Holstein of the dairy goat industry, but they come from Western Europe with a very sort of moderate climate. The Nubians, which often don't get their due because a lot of people, especially in North America, don't milk them, they show them. And so they haven't really been given credit, but they come from North Africa. So they genetically have evolved to live in a hotter climate better. And I think if we can get things like Nubians with good milk production behind them, I think sometimes, people need to seriously consider that some of the European breeds, while on paper produce higher, may not do better in a climate that they really haven't been evolved to produce in well. And so
Jamaicans are all about the
depends a little bit on management and how you can and how those breeds are going to adapt.
Yeah, Jamaicans love the Nubians. Jamaicans love the Nubians, but I'm not sure it's the real milk line Nubians. That it's the Anglo Nubians that is predominantly in Jamaica.
Well, I have we have 4 bucks coming in for collection this year. New bucks in Ontario, so these are just.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that because you cut out there for a second?
Data behind them, and it's up to our expectations.
Internet's bad.
Sorry, we have.
Okay, yeah, repeat
at
that.
what point? So we have 4 bucks coming in July collection.
Yes.
Okay. So in July, Ontario, we have 4 collection, a large milking dairy operation. Their confirmation scored, so I'm hoping they live up to my expectations because we get a lot of requests for Nubian semen, but it's hard to find good Nubians on the milking side. So we may have some options for you come November, December. We'll have some semen and things that we have collected before.
Dr. Young, you get that, Dr. Young? So Dr. Young is our go-to person when it comes to getting genetic semen. So I'm pretty sure she'll be calling you. So we're definitely trying to jumpstart the milking, the goat dairy industry in Jamaica. We're trying to jumpstart it. So there you go. She says she's waiting. She's waiting for you to get that.
On the exact bucks, I will send it.
Okay. So I have a big scientific question for you. How far away are we from gender-specific semen in small ruminants?
Not as far as you might think. So the technology, it is technology. In the UK, Europe has now Cogent. Cogent has 2 sexing. So one of them they use for all their bulls, and the other one they offer on a contract basis to do sheep and goat semen. So they are certainly starting to do semen for dairy sheep and goats. They're going to be in the Netherlands, and then there's a marketing company there that then disseminate it through Europe. They're quite keen on getting sex semen. So depending on how the business is up to do sex semen in the next couple of years, because they're on us doing it. I just said, okay, we've got to find some money behind that because I can't pay for that out of my pocket. The equipment's very expensive.
So wouldn't there be some form of sponsorship from, especially in Canada, your sector in Canada, to support such a big research and development initiative? Bear with us, guys. The internet is bad.
And stuff here in Canada, industry though is minuscule compared to Europe, and so are wanting to prepare to kind of put some partnership to deal together to do that. That would help a lot.
Okay, I hope you guys got that. My last question for you, because I know, yeah, the internet is really bad on your side. We got a question here from Dr. Young. Our internet is really bad, guys. So
please, it's a holiday here, and
yeah.
the lake with their
Okay. So you see this question here from Dr. Young. Can you explain how the Doppler and Bohr originated? I think we lost her. She's gonna try to reboot and come back. Sorry about that, guys. When you live out in the country, remote areas, sometimes you don't get the best internet. We experience that all the time out here in the country. We're not as fortunate as Mr. McCool, who live in the mega city of Mississauga, and Dr. Young, and then in Kingston. We have to deal with bad internet out here in the country. Are you back, Lynn? It's not much better. Um, but we're hanging there. Thank you guys for your patience. Thank you for, we're trying to do our best here.
Will it help if I turn my video off?
Well, I don't know, because people want to see you and hear you, But Dr. Young asked this question.
Okay.
Oh, can you explain how the Doppler and Bohr originated? The Doppeled Bohr originated. They should be good.
I don't have proof, but personal belief is that dappled boars have Nubian in them, because the Nubians, the only way that I could see, they've bred something else. South Africans, and they say the dapple color has never existed in a boar goat ever. So there has to be, it's come from somewhere. Now, Canada, the boars, they had what they called the purebreds, which came from South African embryos. And then they also had the full bloods, which were a breed up program. So if you originally bred boar bucks,
so there's
the Nubian does two types of boars.
Okay, yeah, there's two types of boars. There's a full blood, and then there's
the
a purebred.
Purebred is pure African Australian genetics.
Okay.
Yeah.
So purebred is from the Australian
and the full blood is from the breed up program. They swell, so that confuses everyone. But there's the full blood.
Man, I wish
they started with whatever goats and they bred the boar, and then they bred the next generation boar till I think they get full blood status at 15. The dapple color has come into the boars from somebody to goat that they started with. Their genetics stayed there, and it pops up now and then.
So now people breed to get the dapple in these boars, because I know of a farm out in Ottawa, Cameron.
Yeah.
And she's in Ottawa, close to Ottawa, and she just does dappled boars.
Yep.
And so now I know that dapple boar, not full blood.
So basically, the dapple color came up, and she's locked it.
Yeah, and she breeds specifically for that.
Yeah.
Like everybody's saying, they wish the internet was better so they could get so much more.
Has now, yeah.
Yeah. So any other question, guys? Since we're giving Lynn the opportunity to answer more crazy questions. So let me ask, what is the big difference between
Darren's question about
Darren's question. Hold on.
Full blood purebred.
Yeah.
So in sheep in Canada, a purebred is a breed up. Full blood is the original reason. When the Boer goats started, they fixed the terminology. So they're the only ones in Canada that a full blood is a breed up and a purebred is the original imported genetics. It's very confusing to people, and we have no idea why the goat people flip the terminology compared to every other species. But you know, in Canada, we say that's because they're goat people. They can't do the same as everybody else. So yeah, we got goats in Canada. The Boer goat are Boer.
Okay, so they flipped the terminologies for goat. Got it. And can you tell us?
Yeah,
My question is,
just
what
Boer
is the
goats.
just for goats? What is the major difference in the Anglo Nubians and the other Nubians? We are so much internet issues. Hold on, tick. She's gone. This I wish she had good internet because this would have been amazing information that we could, you know, send out to everybody and get some clarity on stuff. You know, this is the reason why we get these people on, so we can get information that is so important to us breeders, us farmers, and people like us who are trying to get into milk and develop a milk line. How do we do it efficiently? You know, and it really helps when we get these people who have history on it or really deep in the research and development side of it. And um, we're gonna keep trying, keep bringing it until people saying enough already. Carbon Ranch and iGoat Chat. We know, but I'm not gonna stop. Trudy always say it takes 24. You have to repeat something 24 times before you get it, before people get it. I don't know where she gets that number, but I think she's on so she can explain it. She should be coming on to explain it. So we're gonna keep repeating this information over and over because there's new people also. There's new people that come in the business and they don't have the information, and we have to keep repeating it or archive it and bring it up one every so often. So it doesn't matter how often we bring it up and repeat the information. I just wanted to register with people. Thanks, Darren. I think the internet issue is on her side. The platform here shows me that her signal is weak. So I think it's on her side, and she may have lost her internet completely. I'm checking to see if she messaged me on WhatsApp. It's unfortunate, but we're gonna. Darren, you want to sponsor that whole running through the mixer and thing? You want to sponsor me a podcast mixer? I have the model name and number of the one that I want. So what you say, Darren? You wanna sponsor us? Sponsor iGoat Chat? It'll be cool. It's a next level thing that I have to do, but yeah, it's yeah, I know it's a simple setup, but it costs. So maybe I could, if she comes back on, she just don't use a camera. I just messaged her to come on without the camera, and you guys can listen. Um, that will be helpful. And Dr. Young, thanks for participating and dropping in the questions that you think will be helpful to all of us as an expert on this. Um, One thing she said, I didn't realize that the live, the fresh semen has a higher success rate. You know, I didn't realize that. I think it. I thought it was a process that gives the success, process and management. I didn't realize that fresh semen gives higher results, higher success rate. She says she's gonna try to come back with just audio. So let's see. Put 24 to 48 hours. Cool. So even there's some animals here in Jamaica. There's some animals here in Jamaica that we could use fresh semen from. You know, I've seen some amazing bucks here. You know, I've seen a lot of amazing bucks that we could get semen from. Fresh semen that we can reuse. Like if it 24 hours, you pull semen from one of these super bucks that we have here, and the next day you go put it into somebody else's farm. That's amazing. It's better than buck service. Better than having the the chance to run the risk of transferring anything to somebody else's animal or vice versa. But Dr. Young, but I guess the collection process of storing semen in liquid nitrogen is the key, right? If it's collected right, if it's collected properly, then it could be indefinite. But what if it's not? Dr. Young said most local bucks at this time may be related. Good point. Good point. Uh oh. I don't know. Anybody else in drop me a comment if you're starting to see um, remnants or see anything about this storm. We're starting to get lightning and stuff. Hello.
Is that better?
That is a lot better.
Okay, well,
Should
I got off my Wi-Fi and this is just my phone service.
Oh, so your phone service may
Like
be a
I just went off my computer and on my phone.
okay, so that may be your phone may be giving you better service than the Wi-Fi. So I feel like we should be asking you all these questions all over again. Oh my gosh. No, I won't do that to you. Um, so what let's ask another of those questions that I think you got cut off was the purebred and full blood question for boars and the dapple. If you can repeat your answer for that. Let me see if I can find the question for you. Yeah, Dr. Young
How does
said,
that work?
yeah, that's better. That's good.
Okay.
So Dr. Young had asked you to explain the dapple and boar originate, or they originated, right? And that led into the purebred versus full blood for boars. Can you repeat that answer again? Because you think you broke up a lot when you were giving us that answer.
Okay, so in all species other than the boar goats, a full blood is original genetics, and a purebred is bred up through a crossbreeding initially to be whatever that breed is, whether that's a boar or a Simmental cow or whatever. For some insane reason in Canada, when the boar goats first started, they flipped the terminology. So in Canada, in boar goats only, a full blood is a breed up and a purebred is the original genetics.
Oh, wow.
And it's very confusing because they're the only ones who didn't follow the regular rules.
Okay. So that's just Canada.
As far as I know, yes, we're the only people who messed that up seriously.
So we can just ignore what Canada says.
Yes, in everything. So if you're buying boar goat genetics from Canada, that matters. But for every other species in Canada and pretty much everywhere else I know, full blood is original genetics, purebred is part of a breed up program.
Okay, so in Jamaica, boar goats like are referred full blood boars and purebred Nubians. So nobody ever referred to Nubians as full blood Nubians. It's always a purebred Nubians. And when it comes to boars, it's full blood boar, no purebred. We've never heard of purebred boar. If it's not full blood, it's a graded animal. So
okay,
yeah. How does that relate? How does that relate to your understanding of the breeding program? Like, is there such a thing, or should there be a thing in Jamaica where there's purebred boars or purebred and full blood Nubians?
well,
Or
I guess
Nubians? Yeah.
the way it
Go
the
ahead.
way it works in most species is there's a so
We're
if you
we're
start
not
with
seeing you, by the way.
iGoat,
We're seeing the lamp above your head, just so you know.
there you go. Can you see me now?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So the criteria to get up to purebred is, so you start with a goat and you breed it to a boar buck here in Canada, you get 50%, and they're registered as a 50%. When the females get to 7/8, they're considered purebreds. Well, in the boar goat case, called a full blood, and the bucks, when they get to 15/16, have reached that status. But theoretically, a bred up animal can never be a full blood because it could get to 99.99999, but it'll never be 100%. There'll always be that tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of something else. As far as production, I really think that I would look more about the performance traits and the characteristics that you're looking for in the animal and be less concerned about whether it's a purebred or a full blood.
Got it. So here's a question. Is the breed up inferior to the full blooded when it comes to performance, I assume?
No, I don't think so. I think both of those are a selection process. You could buy some full blood boar embryos out of South Africa that are very poor quality goats. Or you could buy some purebred embryos from a country that allowed a breed up program that maybe that animal's 8th or 9th or 10th generation or more, but have purebred status, not full blood. but it could be a much better quality animal. I guess, where the difference is that anything that started out crossed onto a different type of goat is going to have a tiny little bit of those genetics left. And in my personal opinion, that's where the dapple comes from. Somewhere along the way, that color gene came from something else, and it pops up in the boars occasionally because it's there. I don't think that makes them better or worse boars. But if you talk to the guys from South Africa, they'll tell you that a boar goat should never dapple. Like it doesn't exist in the South African genetics.
Okay, so do you think that everybody should go off the South African standards when it comes to boars?
I think that it is important for a breed to have a standard and for people to at least work to achieve that. Certainly from a conformational standpoint, obviously conformational correctness and type are important, because if anything can be a boar goat, regardless of type and conformation, then what's the point in having a breed with a breed standard? There's no perfect animal out there. If somebody finds one, they should stuff it because it might be the only one. But I do believe that we need something to strive towards, and there should be a certain type and performance that a breed has established, and that's kind of an end goal. Obviously, within each country or continent, they're going to adapt a little bit differently maybe to that environment and that management, but there's still a basic size, structure, conformation, those types of things that are going to make a boar goat or a Saanen or a Nubian what they are. And I think that they didn't come by that lightly. So I think that's something to strive for.
Okay. And the other question I asked was the major difference between the Anglo-Nubian and the other Nubian breed.
See, and to me, Anglo-Nubian applies Anglophone or English genetics.
Yes.
So in North America, Nubians are Nubians are Nubians. We don't really distinguish, but there's certainly a portion of the breeders and stuff who will say that we have more of an Anglo-Nubian type. So my suggestion would be that the true North African Nubian would be the true Nubian. And then most of what you'd see in Europe and North America will have had whatever the English or Western Europeans, the genetics they modeled into it, has made what they refer to as an Anglo-Nubian. I think, to be fair, based on climate and production, that probably the Anglo-Nubian is a better dairy goat, because I think the climate and the management, sort of tribal herding management of the Nubian in North Africa, would not aspire to being the level of production that maybe North America would want, or maybe even dairies in Jamaica would want.
Okay. Dr. Young has another question. Speak on the red boar semen that was imported into Jamaica, Almond Acres.
What would you like me to say about it?
I guess you have some information that is vital to this discussion when it comes to Jamaicans, because Jamaicans love the Kalahari red and we don't have it, not that I know of.
Right.
So
again, if you go talk to the South Africans, the boar and the red boar are color variations of the same goat. They don't distinguish. But in Australia, the red boar, or the Kalahari red, basically is kind of evolved as a separate breed. So there are people who breed boars and there are people who raise Kalahari reds. In Canada, we do not make a distinction. A boar goat is a boar goat. Where they distinguish on our registration papers is they have what they call traditional, and those goats have a TR in front of their registration number. That would be the white goat with the dark head, with the brown head.
So
anything
a red boar
is registered here as a non-traditional boar.
Okay, so it's not a Kalahari red. Kalahari red's a whole different breed of goats.
Well, see, we've never recognized the Kalahari Red here, and I still think, again, you talk to South Africans, Kalahari Red is not really a separate breed. That's something the Australians have done. They've split the traditional colors versus the solid reds and made them two breeds. My example would be the Angus cattle in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
There's black Angus and there's red Angus. Well, the red Angus is just a color variant of the black, but over the last 75 years, they've basically evolved into two separate breeds.
Okay. We are getting all the good information tonight. So basically, all this hype about Kalahari Red is just another Borgo.
Yes. So, I mean, what I would like to say to producers is, unless you're breeding for like a purebred show world,
Yeah.
if you're breeding for production and, you know, maybe to sell genetics as well, but you're basically breeding for production and performance, then spend your time and effort to find a goat with the traits that you are looking for first, and color shouldn't matter.
Okay. You guys hear that? I'm going to be running this clip over and over for the next few weeks. Color shouldn't matter.
Nobody pays you for the color when they take the skin off and barbecue the goat.
Wow. I'm gonna be repeating this, guys, over and over. Nobody cares. Nobody's gonna wonder if it's purebred, full blood, or whatever, or if it's a dappled goat. They just want to know how good that curry goat tastes. That's all.
And that's what people need to stop and think about is the person who's, if you're raising boar goats for meat,
Yeah.
then ultimately the product you are producing is what the end user wants to eat.
Yeah.
And it really, you know, conformation, carcass quality, you know, cutting percentage, all those type of things are more important than what color the goat is.
Yes. Unless you're going to what we call Demby in Jamaica, the big agriculture show. Unless you're going there, then I don't think the color and comfort and all that stuff matters.
So in Canada, at those shows, the boars show as traditional or non-traditional. So traditionals are the dark head and the white body, very standard color. Anything that deviates from that color is just considered a non-traditional, but they're still boar goats. Okay. And they still should have the same type and conformation as for the breed standard. They're just a color variant.
Good. Good to know. So we can stop.
They should be able to be purple and it shouldn't matter.
Except it shouldn't be dappled.
Well, and I think there's nothing wrong with a dapple boar if it's a good goat underneath. It, again, I look at it and say it's a color variant, and I'm pretty sure it's come from the breed up program from another breed like Nubian, probably not a Nigerian dwarf, but they carry the dapple. But probably from the Nubian. And again, if it's a good boar goat, try to look past the color. I have the same problem with people who buy horses based on color. Horse could be the most horrible three-legged thing in the planet, but it's an Appaloosa or it's a paint, so they want it, and that makes no sense. So
in Canada, do they recognize at these shows? Do they recognize dappled animals when they're doing this competition? Do they get a separate?
Yep, they would be shown as non-traditional.
Non-traditional.
Because they're a boar goat with a non-traditional color, and that's how they'd be registered too.
Wow, it's good to know. But you know, you can't knock the dapple, man. They look great. They look amazing. And I think you get the same meat to bone ratio, so it's a win-win.
Well, and to be fair to the lady who has those in Canada, and I know who she is.
Yeah.
The dapple color has come up obviously in her breeding, but she's been in boar goats for a long time, and she has some very good quality goats regardless of the color. So if she's decided to focus on the dapple, she got the good goat first, and then the colors appeared, and she decided to go with it. But she still has some very good goats. What concerns me is when you see goats that are being sold for a lot of money because of the color, and they're a pretty horrible goat underneath the color.
Yeah, she's a good friend of Cabra Ranch. We went and hang out with her a whole day, and she's really nice, and she has some amazing
Yep.
animals. Not just the colors,
She
but
has some very nice goats.
yeah, she has some really nice goats. We love her. Any other question, guys? Um, let's take some questions from the viewers here.
There
Any
is
other
a
questions?
question here about the Savannah being a white boar.
What was
It's
that?
my
Yeah.
understanding the Savannah actually has a slightly different genetics than the boar. It is not the exact same goat. That said, only a very, very small number of Savannah embryos came into Canada in the early 2000s. And nothing has come in since because the border to South Africa closed. And so the Savannah population, no matter what they tell you in North America, even between Canada and the US, is highly inbred if they're still pure Savannahs. So I would be very cautious about buying them just because I think that the inbreeding might affect things in a negative way.
Okay.
And they're not necessarily better than a good boar. They look a lot like a white boar. They have very similar size, structure, carcass, but they're very inbred in North America because no new genetics have come in since probably 2001, maybe. I had one of the clients who brought some in originally, and that was a long, long time ago.
So if there's no importation in over a 5-year span or whatever, how do they keep these lines going and keep the genetics strong?
Well, that's the problem. They don't. The upside on the boars, yes, South Africa has been closed for many years to Canada and the US because they do have some foot and mouth disease in South Africa. And they're not so much worried about the semen or embryos carrying it as they are about it being on the tanks coming in on the planes.
Oh.
But because a lot of genetics went to Australia prior to the borders closing, because the border to South Africa is now closed to Australia as well. And so the Australians, I think, have done a really good job with the boars. And so I would not be concerned. I would look North America, certainly producers in the US, and we're trying really hard to get producers here in Canada to become a little more proactive and bring new genetics in out of Australia because we would be in the same boat.
We're pretty close to being in the same boat, or you think Canada has?
I think we're not inbred yet because we had enough genetic diversity. And when the Canada-US border was open for live animals, now that has been 18 years now since they closed the border because of BSE and Scrapie. But a lot of genetics moved between Canada and the US in the goat industry. So I think our diversity is still reasonable. But I think that the quality in some, not all breeders, but has slid a little bit. And I think, even an infusion of new genetics into our population would not be a bad thing.
So between US and Canada, who does the most importation of new genetics? US?
I think it would depend on the breed. Probably in the boars, I would say probably the US, just because they have a bigger meat goat industry down there to begin with than we do.
Okay.
I think it's a bit industry driven, and we have a lot of smaller producers, 30, 40 head, not 400 on the ranch in Texas. And so I think certainly over the years, they've probably done a bit more import from Australia than Canada has.
Okay. So, but Canada has the ability to do semen out of the US and embryos, but not live animals?
We can take semen out of the US only. Live animals and embryos, as far as Scrapie is concerned, are considered to have the same status. And so right now the border's closed both directions for those. We can send semen back and forth, but that's it.
Between Canada and the US?
Yeah. And that's a whole nother show about how I feel about the international politics of that don't match the science.
Okay, so we should book you next month for that?
Yeah. Yeah. The international trade in genetics is a whole that's 5% science and 95% politics.
No, we would love to have you back to talk about that because Jamaica is like going through a inbreed crisis, and one of the biggest issue is eugenetics. We can't get it. We can't bring live animals. It's hard to get embryo permits and all that stuff. And then the standard is so high that only a few people in North America is willing to do what it takes to send it here.
And so, that is a bit of the challenge, yes.
Yeah. So it is a major problem and something worth having a discussion on, especially for Jamaican farmers who are asking this question over and over and over. Why can't we get animals in the country? Why can't we get an influx of embryos or whatever? It's because the rules are so strict. The standard to bring it in is so high.
Well, and unfortunately for goats, the genotypic resistance to scrapie has not been established in goats the way it has in sheep. Okay. So where sheep can either meet flock requirements for scrapie status or they can be genotypically resistant donors, that has not been established for goats yet. That said, we had a scrapie, not really an outbreak, but a scrapie situation a few years back in the dairy goat industry in Ontario. They ended up with one or two goats that were positive for scrapie, and then obviously they have to do the trace outs to these farms. And what came out of that is they ended up having to euthanize a lot of animals and test them. And so in the process, the researchers have started looking at which goats had scrapie and which didn't, and they have identified, I think there's 3 different sites on the genome now that confer either susceptibility or resistance to scrapie in goats. They've done quite a lot of research with it. The Europeans have done some research too. And you can test for it both in Canada and I think UC Davis in the United States can do the genotype testing. And so we're kind of hoping that as that moves forward, like right now, one of the big Sonnen producers in Canada, and you have some of Grass Hill Farm Genetics in Jamaica, they have found kids that are both resistant and susceptible genotypically to scrapie. They are now at the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency research facility in Lethbridge, and they're actually basically exposing them to scrapie to see if they can, if they're actually resistant to it, if they challenge them, or if they come down with scrapie. So those kids just went down there this spring, so it might be a few years, but we're headed down the path where genotypic resistance might become an option that'll make it easier for you guys to get goat embryos into Jamaica. And potentially maybe down the road live animals. There's a lot of disease risks to moving live animals around, and so I understand why countries are really reluctant to import live animals if they can avoid it.
Yeah, I know the live animal part in Jamaica is, I think they've been bitten 2 or 3 times, and the powers to be are saying no, we're not doing it again.
It's almost impossible to send a live anything into Australia for the same reason.
Oh.
Right? They're an island, they can control their borders, and so they do. And that, but they're a scrapie-free country too.
Yeah, and Jamaica is a scrapie-free country, island.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Young, but I'm pretty sure it is based on the people that I've spoken to, and I think that's their biggest fear is for this disease like scrapie to come in and they can't control it.
Exactly, and I understand that. That is the science part for sure. So I think not wanting to not make work for myself or sales for myself, because if you're a scrapie-free country and Australia is a scrapie-free country, then I think it's often worth looking to see about maybe importing some genetics from Australia. They do have some really good goats there, especially on the boar side, not as much on the dairy side.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure, that would be a great idea, Dr. Young, to talk to Dr. Watson and them people and let them explore coming from Australia. It's far away. I don't know what the cost will be, but I think it'd be worth it. They got great animals. They're amazing boar animals. I don't know, as you said, I've never seen them showing dairy animals, but the boars are beautiful. They got amazing genetics down there.
They do. They've done well, and they've done a lot of selection. And so I think, like I say, I think the Canadian industry would benefit from Australian genetics as well.
So, what is the plan for Canada to get it? Are they considering it, or?
Well, yeah, you're right. The logistics of collection. There are diseases Australia does have that Canada doesn't want, like brucellosis and blue tongue. So there is definitely an elongated process to getting it in. But I do have a few producers here that are saying, maybe we just all need to get together. When it comes to something like that, I guess, on the ground, everybody's sort of competition to everybody else if they're selling breeding stock. But if you really want to get new genetics in, it's not worth it to bring in 10 or 15 straws of semen. People need to kind of join together and, do the import in the bigger picture, and then, go from there.
Okay.
So.
Wow. Anything Canada has, I think Jamaica would benefit from it because of the relationship. I think Canada seems to be more trusted from a Jamaican perspective than the US. I think that's just my opinion based on talking to people that are making these decisions. They always seem to.
Yeah, and I think we have some good genetics, both dairy and in the boars and the meat goats. I think what people need to realize when they're looking to import semen is that the sheep and goat industry, unlike the cattle world, does not have tens of thousands of straws just sitting around waiting for somebody to buy them.
Yeah.
Part of that is because the testing requirements are different than cattle, and the volume's not there, so it's more expensive. So people don't tend to freeze a lot of semen speculatively. Mm-hmm. So our breeding collection season runs from sort of September to January. We're quite far north, and so goats are quite seasonal here, unlike Jamaica, where they probably will breed just about year round. And so, if people are wanting to get semen, they need to consider that for us to source bucks, we have to be looking for them in March, April, May. We need them to be coming to us June, July, getting through their 60 days of testing and isolation to be able to enter collection. And then our collection kind of October, November, December. So it's really kind of, you got to plan, at least probably a year to 2 years out, especially if we need to go source, the best genetics we can, because it's very hard to get mature bucks. A lot of times people only have bucklings for sale. And they collect okay, but it's not ideal. So sometimes we end up taking them in as bucklings or as fall or summer born, July born. So when they're coming to us, they're just hitting that year. And it's a lot of legwork, and Canada's a very large country. And so that's kind of where we're at.
Has anybody ever come to Jamaica and see if there's anything unique here, whether it's in the boar or Nubian, that is worth storing and that could make an impact somewhere else?
I don't know if anybody has.
We've seen some amazing animals here, some amazing bucks. I don't know the bloodlines or where they come from and what they're mixed with or whatever, but I've seen some super looking bucks. But they're usually 4 or 5 years old though.
Yeah, but then they've proven themselves too. They're not too old to freeze semen on.
Yeah.
So I think where you need to consider that, where I would think, maybe there's a market for you guys, is probably in other parts of the Caribbean. Yes. Climate is similar, and trade amongst those countries sometimes is more cooperative. I know Canada does not allow anything hardly in except from the UK, New Zealand, Australia is about where we're limited to. And that's not just scrapie. That has to do with other diseases that you may have in Jamaica that we don't. So, I mean, it is a possibility. I'd have to look and see what the Canadian requirements would be for semen to come from Jamaica.
If Canada can take all these dogs off the street in Jamaica, they can take some goat semen.
You don't want to get me started on that.
They came down here and take all these dogs off the street and brought them to
We
Canada.
have enough stray dogs in Canada. I don't know why we need to take other people's stray dogs. We've got our own.
No, our dogs are cool. They're like, they speak patois and stuff.
Yeah, I don't pretend to understand that. I try to stay out of that world because I usually end up yelling at somebody.
Yeah, but yeah, so that whole concept, I don't get it, but I understand, like, you know, bureaucracy, and I guess dogs don't transfer diseases the way goats do.
Well, they do. They bring diseases that we don't have, and people don't consider that because they're not regulated quite like livestock. But because of a horrific shipment of dogs that came in from Czechoslovakia or something, CFIA now has very rigid permitting process for dogs to come in from anywhere if they're not just your pet traveling with you.
Well, I don't know how Jamaica they did that with Jamaica, but it was a whole plane load of dogs out of Montego Bay.
Yep.
Canada.
Yeah, now that happened from Czechoslovakia, and the dogs came off the plane, and some had died, and they were sick, and that happened quite recently. And CFIA has now really tightened up the regulations.
Yeah, Mr. McCook
said again, we have our own sick street dogs.
Yeah, the dogs are having a problem adjusting. Yeah, Jamaican dogs are not used to the winter, man.
No, that would be a little tough on them.
Yeah. So any other question, guys, before we let Lynn go, because we don't want to, keep her too long, although we're enjoying this discussion. We're going to have to book you back, Lynn. I know you're pretty busy, but our space here, all the people who are on with us, this kind of information they're interested in. They want to know how they can improve what they have and the best practices to get there.
Okay. Well, no, happy to do it.
One question I have for you, and I know Dr. Young talk about it all the time, the flushing process, whether it's for breeding naturally or for AI and ET. What is your take? What is the best approach to do this?
So what the goal is to have them on an increasing plane of nutrition. So this maybe doesn't happen in Jamaica. It certainly happens here. You can't take a fat animal and just make them fatter and get the flushing response. Right? If they're already too fat, there's no merit to flushing them nutritionally. And obesity and reproduction are opposites. So we often don't get good results with really fat animals for a lot of reasons. So that would be the first part. So what we're generally looking at is the way the body thinks is if it goes, wow, there's lots of food, I'm gaining a little bit of weight, life is good, I could get pregnant. If they're too thin or the food nutrition's not good enough, then they're going to go, this might not be a good time to have babies and get pregnant because I may not be able to feed myself through the winter, let alone feed myself pregnant. And I say winter because here they breed in the fall. So that's kind of what the body is thinking about. And so the nutritional flushing means you don't want them to be starvation thin, but you'd like them to go into a program. I use a body condition score system of 5. And so you'd like them to go into a program maybe at about a 2.5, because normally they should live at about a 3. Okay. So you want them kind of between that 2.5 and the 3. And then generally speaking, we only flush them for about 2 weeks. So if we're using synchronized programs using CEDARs, basically they start getting, here they get a little bit of grain, starting when the CEDARs go in. We sort of build that until AI, and then we slowly taper the grain back off or over a few weeks. Because you don't want to AI them and then just suddenly cut off the extra nutrition, because then their body goes into a bit of a crash.
Yeah.
And you might lose pregnancies that otherwise would have held.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the philosophy behind nutritional flushing. It definitely works. Where we struggle is if we're doing repeated embryo flushes back to back, is it's hard to flush them without getting them overweight.
Okay. So if the animals are grazing, right? If you have a maintenance females that are grazing, and you want to flush to go into a breeding season, a breeding program, so would it be the similar 2 weeks of little bit of grain on top of the grazing, so their body gets tricked into, oh, there's more energy, more food here. I'm good to go.
Yep. So you can do it. You can do it with a little bit of grain.
Yeah.
For us, mostly our animals are. By the time we're doing AI work, our animals are no longer grazing because summer has ended. So you can do that, or you can turn them into a new, little bit higher quality pasture for grazing. You can bump them up with better grass if you have it.
Well,
If
all
you
my
don't have it, like I say, you can top them up with a bit of grain.
yeah, well, all our pastors are the same. Like they're just
So then I would probably suggest using some sort of a grain or concentrate. And it
yeah.
doesn't need to be a large amount. Sometimes half a pound a day, quarter of a kilo, if you guys are thinking metric, per head. It doesn't need to be a lot. It just needs to be enough for their body to go, ooh, there's some extra. I could ovulate and get pregnant.
And you do that for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think more than, I mean, if you had a group that you looked at them and went, wow, these guys are really thin, and you've got enough lead time, maybe you do it for longer because you want to bring them up to that 3 out of 5 by the time you hit AI.
Okay.
So my other suggestion is flushing or no flushing. If you're planning an AI program, you need to look at your goats at least 60 days out from that.
Okay.
Are they too thin? Are they too fat? Are they about where you want them to be? And plan your nutrition accordingly. You can't just correct it at the last minute.
Okay. Got it. You hear that, guys? I'm trying to make sure that we get as much information as we can for these guys because AI is a big push right now in Jamaica. Yep. Even from the Ministry of Agriculture, they're launching their own AI program to boost the numbers in Jamaica. So AI is very important, and people need to know what the right approach should be to get success out of it. You know?
Again, it's planning. You can't just wake up and go, I think I'll AI in 2 weeks. It's planning and how your animals are managed kind of all the time. So the people in my world that have the best results are the people who are on top of their nutrition and their management all the time. And then they just have to tweak the little things to get ready for an insemination program. Mineral nutrition is huge. So, it really depends. I would not pretend to know about your mineral nutrition in Jamaica, but like here where I live, we're very short of selenium. Yes. We have some places that are short of copper because they have high sulfur in the soil. So if you you need to address all of those things and give yourself time to get all those things right. Because if those aren't right, you could have the best semen and the best inseminator, and you're still not going to get pregnancies because the goat's not ready for it.
Okay.
My other suggestion is never, ever, ever put an animal into an AI program that didn't have kids in the previous kidding time. So here in Alberta, if you called me and said, I want AI goats in October, and 5 of the 10 goats did not have kids this past spring, then I would say what is reproductively wrong with them that they didn't breed naturally? Because if they won't breed naturally, unlike in the human world, AI is not a way to fix your reproductive problems. And in the human world, it is. That's what they do for people who can't conceive. They do all these technologies. In our world, we're not here to fix the ones that can't do it on their own. We're there to improve the genetics of the ones that can do it on their own.
So you wouldn't do a virgin animal?
In a perfect world, no. Now we do sometimes do what we call dolings. So if they're well grown and they have had a period like they're cycling naturally on their own, So
Yes.
you know they've reached reproductive maturity. Then if a person wanted to do them, I would say fine. Generally, conception rates are a little bit lower because, again, some of those animals might never conceive naturally or otherwise, but they're virgins, so you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, as long as if I can force them to cycle, even if they haven't reached puberty, I can force these things with drugs, but often the conception rates are quite low. So I recommend that people have a teaser, so a vasectomized male.
Okay.
So he behaves like a buck, except he's sterile, basically, and put him in with a group of doelings, even a group of mature does. If you're planning an AI program, put him in there and see who's already cycling naturally. Because the ones that are cycling naturally already are going to stand better odds of conceiving to insemination than the ones that aren't. And whether that's because they're too young or whether that's because they have something else wrong that they're just not cycling, if you weed those out of the game right at the beginning, you stack the odds in your favor of getting better percentages.
So in Jamaica, we have what they call the native animal, right? I'm sure you're aware
Yep.
of it. So the bucks from the native animals, they are just like they're on some form of steroids, like Viagra or something. I don't know what they're on. So I think they would make perfect teaser bucks, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because they will jump anything. They're always
Yep.
people are scared of them because they will ruin your whole herd if you let them get in there.
So that's what you want in a teaser. You want high libido.
Mm-hmm.
They can be ugly as sin if you want. It doesn't matter because they're not contributing any genetics. They're completely sterile. But you want them to have high libido. That's the criteria.
Yes, that's the native buck. That is the native buck.
Yep.
He's always ready to go. Always, guys, give me a thumbs up or a fire emoji, whatever. If you agree with me, native bucks in Jamaica are the scariest thing to have on your farm because they will do whatever they can to find the females.
Yep.
So that we
That's who
know
you
that
want.
that's some value.
Yeah. No, that is absolutely who you want. And I mean, when you're not using them, they're still bucks in their mind and everything except being sterile. They can live with the other bucks. They don't have to live separately or anything else. They're a little bit of an investment to have the surgery done to make them. But I mean, a good teaser buck could be 5, 6, 8 years in the herd as long as he's doing his job.
So, what is the best way to do it? Like you can't ban them, right? Not the band.
No, they need their testicles. They've got to have the testicles because they need the testosterone.
So you have to do the clamp.
So there's no, because that'll still. So it's a surgery. So you have two options. You can either do a vasectomy, where literally surgically, Dr. Young, I'm sure knows how to do this. You remove a portion of the vas deferens so that the semen produced in the testicle just can't get out of the testicle, right?
Okay.
Hits the end of the road. Or you can do what they call an epididectomy, where they take the epididymis off, which is that little knob on the end of the testicle. So really what it does is it just takes out the bridge. So the testicle still makes sperm, but the sperm has nowhere to go. It can't get all the way through the tract to breed.
So you would suggest somebody who's serious about their breeding program definitely keep a teaser buck on the farm.
I think everybody should have one, yes. But especially if you're doing reproductive technology work like AI and ET, they are invaluable.
Yeah, but even if you're doing a group breeding, like
yep,
if you
put him in for a couple weeks ahead of time.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep, you put him in for a couple weeks ahead of time, especially in doelings, if they're just on the verge of puberty, that'll get the doelings cycling. And then when the breeding buck goes in, one, they're not terrified of this big slobbery stinky thing. And you've got them going cycling. A number of years back, my vet partner, she has Romanov sheep, and the only thing they changed in their whole program, they didn't change nutrition, nothing. All they changed was with their ewe lambs is they put a teaser in for 2 weeks before the ram, and they went from a 70% catch rate on the first cycle to 95.
Wow.
because they got those ewe lambs going. That's the only thing they did differently.
Wow. So now,
So, like I say, little bit of an investment to have a vet do the surgery to make one. But
mhm.
I mean, if they're good and you manage them, they could be in your herd for years.
So now there is a real value, breeding value to our native bucks because
Yes.
they're up there when it comes to testosterone, and like, they just go
Yep.
crazy and they make the most noise.
So
They got,
they're the most, and they probably stink the most. So that
yes,
they are the most appealing to the females.
yeah. Okay, so here's a question about three droppers and four droppers. Females that mothers that have 3 kids, 4 kids. What is the advantage? I guess if you're in meat, I know the advantage. The numbers go up. But what is there? There's always a pro and a con to these things. What is the pro?
There
What are
is.
the pros? What are the cons?
So if a boar is having 3 or 4 as a meat goat, and you're thinking that she's going to raise all of those herself, she's probably not. What you're going to end up with is usually either 1 or 2 really good ones, and the others are small. They just don't grow the same way because a boar goat was never really designed or selected to raise triplets or quads on her own. There are a few that would do it.
Yeah.
In the sheep industry here in Canada, people will have what they call a nursery. And so they'll leave 2 with the mom, and then they'll put the extras into the nursery and bottle raise them. So there is a cost, obviously, associated with that because they buy milk replacer. So I think,
Mhm.
for most people, aiming for triplets and quads is not ideal. Now, once you get into the dairy goats, a lot of the dairy goats, because they've been selected for milk production, if you're not milking them commercially, a lot more of the dairy goats, I think, would raise triplets, just because they're selected for milk production. So they're going to have a bigger udder and produce more milk. And the kids will generally thrive even as triplets. Quads, there are some goats, dairy goats, that will raise quads. But again, you're starting to really put the pressure on. And it can be done. But then again, those animals end up having to be fed differently or better. If you don't put the food into them, they won't put the milk out the other side. The goat's perspective is, if I don't have enough to eat, I am going to sacrifice milk production before I am going to sacrifice myself. So they'll let a kid die from starvation before the goat will produce so much milk that she doesn't make it. I mean, that's a
Okay.
bit of a self-preservationist thing that is pretty natural. So I think it just depends on what people want to do. I know here people get all excited about all those extras and all they see is the dollar signs, but they don't see the time and effort and cost that goes into hand raising or bottle raising a number of kids or a number of lambs every year. And the people
Yeah.
who do it well have
Yeah.
automatic milking machines.
Yeah. We had four bottle babies in our January group, and it was a lot of work. Trudy can
Yeah.
can
So
can attest to that. It was a lot of work,
yeah.
and
And if
I
you
don't
get up
know.
to bigger numbers, like I have a client that their nursery probably has 50 babies in it. But that's because they're kidding out, 200 head at a time.
Yeah, but they have an automatic milker, right? They got them
And
that.
they have an automatic milker, which does a fantastic job of raising the babies.
Yeah. So when you get into
So
that
like I
kind of
say,
numbers, then you'd have to invest into an automatic feeder.
yeah, yeah. If you have the genetics that'll raise triplets and you have the ability to feed them accordingly, they can do it. But I don't know for everybody if it should be their end goal. I think sometimes if they actually did the dollars in, dollars out, it's not as good a deal as they might think.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the triplets and all them things. One, the amount of energy and time that goes into dealing with the extra kids, I don't know if the return on it is worth it, unless it's females, like and you're growing, but it's still a lot.
Yeah.
It's not an input,
But
you know.
that's something everybody should pencil out in their farm business plan before they just drive, run down that road.
So is a 3 and 4 dropper a genetic trait, or it's a nutrition and breeding thing?
It's a bit of both. The genetics sort of need to be there for them to be more prolific, that sort of prolificacy. But the nutrition needs to be right too, because even goats genetically capable of 3s and 4s, if they're poorly fed and poorly managed, will probably only have 1 or 2.
Okay.
And so it's a bit of both.
Got it. You know, just today we had a female that had 3 kids, and she didn't look like she was going to have 3 kids. So, you know, this is very important for us that, you know, we're going to have to. I've been thinking, do I give her more more concentrate than what I've been giving her? How do I deal with this so I don't have to adopt this extra kid?
Well, and that's the hard part, because I mean, you can feed her more to help her milk more, but probably she should have been on a little better diet even in the last trimester.
Yeah,
You need to
we
talk
always
to Gabby about ultrasounding your goats and being able to count fetuses for you so that you know how to divide them up for feeding while they're pregnant.
Yeah, that's true. I'll take
She'll
that.
probably smack me for that, but
No. She was here, so I should have asked her to do an ultrasound. But
I have a
she
lot of
definitely
clients that we
love it.
scan for fetal numbers, and we split them up into feeding groups based on how many fetuses they're carrying.
Oh, really? Because we definitely
Yeah.
increase our feeding and nutrition on every mother, you know, a month out before kidding. We don't really definitely check to see how many animals, how many kids are in there. I guess that's another
Yeah.
next level thing that we have to do. Guys, you see when it comes to this stuff, how much management goes into it, you know? So now I'm gonna have to feed this mother more or adopt the kid. Like I have to
Yeah.
talk to the nutritionist and see, okay, what extra do I need to give her? You
Yeah.
know?
Like I say, it's the management all the time.
Yes.
And that's why I always tell people, like, artificial insemination and ET are not last minute choices. It's about having an ongoing plan and managing your flock accordingly. And good management goes a long way no matter what. And then you can just tweak the little things you need to do to make your insemination and stuff more successful. But you can't take a flock in crisis and suddenly decide that new semen is the answer to their problems, because chances are management is the answer to the problems.
Okay. That is vital information, and thank you very much for that, because it's amazing once you have this kind of discussion that this information comes out. You know it, but hearing it over and over from someone like you, Dr. Young, everybody, you're like, okay, I definitely got to take the extra step and implement these things. You know, and
Well,
you can't go ahead.
Alina and I always used to say to people that everything we tell you to do or not do, we've learned the hard and expensive way.
Yeah.
And so you can choose not to listen to us, but we know how it's going to end. And we probably won't feel sorry for you. And we might say, we told you so. And one of the vets I work with in the UK, he always says to people, like, especially with the AI and ET, he said, we control all the things we can. And the goal is that you win more often than you lose, but you're not going to win every time.
Okay. Got it.
And you need to kind of go into it with that. Like you can do everything you can do, and you can play your cards right and do your job and do your management. But every now and then something comes along and smacks you that you have no control over. Like you get a big storm, or here we get suddenly it drops to -40. We were in the middle of collecting bucks this year. We had a week of -40, and their semen quality tanked on us for almost a month.
Wow.
So, like I say, that's like everything we tell people to do or not do, we've learned it by paying the price. And so if they don't listen to us, then, we tend not to be that sympathetic. we don't tell people to do things or not do things just because we don't think they have anything better to do.
Yeah. I understand that. And that's why it's great to talk to people like you who have been through it, have the experience, and you can share with people like us who are we're only 2 years into this. Because we were talking to you when we were starting this up and how to get genetics into Jamaica, only to find out it's not that simple. But I appreciate you, Lynn. I appreciate you coming on. I would love to have you in the near future again to talk about other things, more on the line of what are the political ramifications of animals moving from country to country, all that stuff, because they're real people, real in big time thinkers, and people who want to do big things in Jamaica with small ruminants, and to get the information from someone like you helps them navigate the
Yes. And to make a plan. Like I
yeah.
say, these things don't happen overnight. So you need to kind of think, what's my 3 to 5 year plan on this?
Exactly. So it's amazing to have you on, and we'd love to have you on in the near future. And I appreciate everything that you do. You know that I'm a big fan. So Harbor Ranch is a big fan of what you do, and we've been talking for a couple of years on and off, and we appreciate you. All of our listeners and viewers and followers appreciate you coming on, and I want to thank you. And we will talk.
Thank you for having me. Hopefully, when this COVID craziness ends, I might get to come down there.
Oh, you got to come to Jamaica and make sure that you have Cabo Ranch on your agenda to visit. I will definitely talk to Dr. Young because I know she's going to monopolize all your time when you come. So we'd have to go through her. But I appreciate you coming on. And on behalf of Cabo Ranch and Jamaica and our viewers, everybody, thank you very much for everything you do and all the help you've given Jamaica in the small ruminant sector. Appreciate it.
No problem. I quite enjoyed it. And I guess if anybody, we have one called OC Flock Learn. We have a Facebook page.
Yes.
That if people, it's free to join. They can just put in a request to join, and people can throw out questions. And we have members from lots of places, not just Canada. And lots of times producers will chime in. I often chime in about the more medical things. So if anybody is interested, they're more than welcome.
Sorry, my window is open and the storm is here.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. All of a sudden, it just came out of nowhere. Yeah, it just started blowing in. All of a sudden, I'm like, whoa, the storm is here. It's lightning, it's thunder, it's blowing crazy. All right, folks. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Lynn. And we will see you guys next week. And Lynn, we will talk and try to get you on somewhere down the road when things are hectic and you can tell us all about the transfers and pulling a semen.
Sure. No problem at all.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
You're
and
welcome.
I'm going to go make sure my animals are good. I'm going over there right now to make sure everything is good. Everybody is safe. All right. Thank you, guys. Talk to you soon. See you next week.